Going into week 17, oh, going into Monday Night Football, Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback 10 on the week for week 16, and he faced off against the New York Jets on Thursday Night Football. Lawrence finished 20 of 31 passing, 229 passing yards. He did not have a pick or an interception, but he set a secondary season high for rushing yards. He had 51. Only one other game this year did he eclipse that with 53 back in week 9 against Las Vegas. But for the second time in 3 games, Lawrence rushed for a touchdown, which got him to 18.2 fantasy points for the week. And this is the 5th time in the last 6 games that Trevor Lawrence has been a top 10 quarterback. And he gets Houston in week 17. And Houston is tough against opposing quarterbacks. Teams don't score a lot of fantasy points through the air against the Houston Texans because there are a lot of fantasy points scored on the ground. And Houston has nothing to lose. Houston ended up actually winning their game in week 16. So they're playing with a little bit of extra oomph, and the Jaguars, the game really that only matters to them is week 18. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Jaguars, even though they're on a hot streak, even though they're playing really well, they may pull starters later on in the game if the game is in hand, or they may not be as aggressive. Now, maybe they are going to be a little aggressive at the beginning of the game. You could see Lawrence being aggressive down the field with Zay Jones and Marvin Jones and Christian Kirk. But I would not anticipate a full game of aggression for Trevor Lawrence against the Houston Texans, especially given that the Houston Texans are really susceptible to giving up fantasy points on the ground. If you like the content and this is helpful to you, make sure you hit that red subscribe button. It really helps the channel. In fact, the Houston Texans give up the most fantasy points to running backs. So I view this as a big Travis Etienne game, rushing, sprinkle in a little bit of deep JaMychal Hasty. Like, you have to bump up Hasty a bit in your rankings. But Trevor Lawrence he's going to be an auto start for you against a bad Houston team, even though there's not a lot of upside. There are narratives to think that he's not going to be a top 5 quarterback like he had been in 3 of the previous 4 games going into week 16. So I think quarterback 10, quarterback 12 is going to be the right spot for him. Maybe you could bump him up to quarterback 8, but I'm not getting him into that top 5 ranking for this final week unless we hear other news that there are going to be other starters that are resting week 17. I just don't anticipate that being the case. So Trevor Lawrence he's still a startable quarterback for me against Houston, even though Houston hasn't given up a lot of fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. But you do have to temper expectations. You shouldn't expect a week 14 game like Kansas City where he was the quarterback 1, scored 33 points. That's just not how I envision that week going for him.